7 weeks. We understand that it probably has not been convenient for you to be here every day, and we are so grateful for your time and careful consideration of the evidence as you deliberate. After weeks of sitting in this courtroom, listening to testimony and looking at evidence, now it's time for you, the jury, to come to a decision. You have been entrusted with a serious task. What is at stake in this trial is a man's good name. Even more than that, what is at stake at this trial is a man's life. The life that he lost when he was accused of a heinous crime, and the life he could live when he is finally vindicated. Exactly 6 years ago today, on May 27th, 2016, Ms. Heard walked into court and filed a false report of domestic abuse against her husband of 15 months, Johnny Depp. The scene was a setup. She tipped off the paparazzi so they would be waiting. They knew exactly where she would pause, which side of her face to photograph. And the photos captured what she wanted them to see, the image of a battered woman. The world only saw what she wanted them to see. Two years later, when promoting the biggest role of her career until this trial, Ms. Heard presented herself to the world as a public figure representing domestic abuse. The headline of the op-ed featured the term sexual violence, even though she had never before accused her ex-husband of such a heinous crime. Ms. Heard and her lawyers love to remind you of how the op-ed did not mention Mr. Depp by name. But Ms. Heard made sure that there would be no mistake about who she was referring to. She inserted 2 years ago, so the world would remember the photo of a battered woman, the mark on her face, standing outside the courthouse, and they would once again see Mr. Depp as the villain, this time in full swing of the Me Too movement. But what was happening behind closed doors was quite different from what Ms. Heard presented to the world. The exact opposite, in fact. There is an abuser in this courtroom, but it is not Mr. Depp. And there is a victim of domestic abuse in this courtroom, but it is not Ms. Heard. Heard never thought she would be held accountable, never thought that she would have to face her abuser. She never thought she would have her supposed mountain of evidence vetted. She never thought that Mr. Depp would tell you, the jury, and the world that he was the real victim of domestic abuse. She said it in her own words.
You can please tell people that it was a fair fight and see what the jury and judge think. Tell the world, Johnny. Tell them, Johnny Depp. Johnny Depp, man, I'm a victim too of domestic violence, and yes. It's a fair fight. And see how many people believe or side with you.
At the start of this case, Mr. Chu and I stood before you to give you our opening statements on behalf of Mr. Depp. During that statement, we made promises to you about what the evidence would ultimately show at the end of this trial. We've kept those promises. One of those promises we made was that you would come to understand who Ms. Heard is, that she is a deeply troubled person, violently afraid of abandonment, desperate for attention and approval. And in her relationship with Mr. Depp, she was violent, she was abusive. You heard from Mr. Depp and Ms. Heard's couple therapist, Dr. Anderson, that Ms. Heard reported that when Mr. Depp would leave to de-escalate a fight, she would strike him to keep him there because she would rather be in a fight than have him leave. You heard from Mr. Depp about how often Ms. Heard would berate him, insult him, and physically attack him, including one of the most serious occasions when Ms. Heard threw a vodka bottle at Mr. Depp, severely injuring his finger, and then put a cigarette out on his face. You heard from Mr. Depp that this whole incident in Australia started because Ms. Heard was enraged that Mr. Depp wanted a post-nuptial agreement, and she wasn't in his will, just a month after getting married. When her husband was seriously injured and bleeding from a partially amputated finger, what did Ms. Heard do? She pursued him. She kept coming after him, because that's what she does. She wouldn't stop.
Alaska said, "You have now come to know the real Amber Heard." Scary. We also told you at the start of this trial that you were going to come to know the real Johnny Depp, not the many characters you've seen him play so wonderfully in the movies, but the man himself. We kept that promise. You've met the real Johnny Depp. You have heard that Mr. Depp came from humble, very difficult beginnings. You have heard from Mr. Depp's big sister, who's here in the courtroom today, Christy Dombrowski, who told you how Mr. Depp grew up in a deeply troubled household with a mother, Betty Sue, who was physically abusive and mentally cruel. As Ms. Dombrowski testified, one of the names that Betty Sue called Mr. Depp when he was a little boy was One Eye, because he had to wear an eye patch for some time. His mother used to hit his father and the kids, including young Mr. Depp. And when his mother got violent, Mr. Depp would retreat and find a place to hide. Sometimes he and his sister Christy would find a place to hide together. Mr. Depp never hit back. And like his father, he either stood up and took the violence or he retreated from it. Those are habits he returned to later when he found himself in a relationship with another person who returned his love with abuse, with physical abuse. And despite this long, unhappy history with his mother, Johnny never turned his back on her. In her elder years, Mr. Depp moved his mother to California, and he moved her to Los Angeles right across the street from his house so his two children could get to know her. He hired nurses for his mother. He made sure to take care of her and to make her comfortable. She never went to hospice. She had the nurses make her comfortable to the day she died. And from those humble and difficult beginnings, Mr. Depp grew into one of the greatest actors and movie stars of his generation. Now, he came to Los Angeles with his first love as a young man, planning to be a musician. Music had been a part of his life ever since he found peace himself in his room as a young boy when he was escaping. And he learned to play the guitar and would use it as solace. But it was an actor as his star began its rise, as he appeared in films too many to mention, including, of course, his iconic role as Captain Jack Sparrow in the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise. Fame came with challenges to Mr. Depp and his family. It was a strange experience for a shy young man from Kentucky to be thrust into the limelight, pursued by paparazzi, and to have even his very name become a brand. But he did his best to live a private, quiet life, and despite it all, and over the years built a reputation as a respected artist and as a decent, very well-liked man, which you've heard from many people. Mr. Depp dated major figures like Winona Ryder, Kate Moss, and Vanessa Paradis, with whom he spent 14 years together and with whom they had their children. Before Amber Heard, ladies and gentlemen, no woman ever before Amber Heard ever claimed that Mr. Depp raised a hand to her.
وصلنا إلى بداية النهاية لافتراءات السيدة هيرد ضد السيد ديب. هل تجدون أن عناصر التشهير موجودة؟ الإجابة كلا. أما بالنسبة نحن نعوض السيد ديب ب 2 مليون وكذلك نحكم $0 هل قررتم بشأن تصويت المحلفين؟ إن كان هذا قراركم أرجو أن تجيبوا نعم. المحلف رقم 6 نعم، 10 نعم، 15 نعم، 16 نعم، 29 نعم. نجد أن هذا القرار من هيئة المحلفين بالإجماع. الآن نشكركم على خدمتكم وعلى عملكم الدؤوب خلال هذه المحاكمة، وأود أن أتحدث عن الجميع وأقدر لكم تضحياتكم ووقتكم وخدمتكم المدنية في هذه القضية.